Hey everybody, we're going to be looking a little bit at the bass instrument. This is one of our session instruments that came in some of the most recent updates to Logic. And as we get ready for the next updates to come to Logic, I thought it'd be a good time to recap and talk about a couple of the things that we've really not just learned, but began to use over the past year since we got version 11. Now, the bass instrument for me is one of the strongest new features in Logic. The piano, I think, is good, great. The instrument itself sounds amazing. The session instrument capabilities, I think, still have a ways to go. I think that they can be used with the right person and really tweaking out the instruments to make it sound how you want it to. But with the bass, I find so much helpful sounds and programming coming from this. It's just one of the stars of Logic right now. If I could take a song I was working on, say I played a guitar or just my own keyboard part, and then had the chord track analyze the chords for me, and then just added the bass to that, that's my dream right now. That's the dream I have for one of our future Logic updates, the chord track to do more for us. I think it's going to be really great. But what I want to focus on today are a few of the reasons why the bass instrument is as good as it is. The instrument itself, really well programmed, a lot of tools here to get us exactly where we want to be with the bass instrument. And we have a number of different instruments. I mean, they've really given us an amazing sonic palette with this studio bass. The thing that I think is really helpful to understand would be the articulation system inside Logic. This is not new. In fact, if I were to pull open a brand new instrument here and put on here the studio strings, which has been around a while, you'll see the articulation set is here as well. In fact, this is one of the only ways to make the studio strings sound good is by using the articulation functionality. So what exactly is it? This allows us to change what the notes are doing. That changes the sample they're pulled from. And so we can create a very realistic sounding bass because we have all of these different sounds. In essence, that's why it's so powerful, but it's also something that we need to explore and talk about a little bit further. If we look down into our actual properties area, you'll see we have articulation set, and it's not set for any of them right now. And I have the strings loaded, but we could load it up for the strings depending on which one we want to use. With the bass, let's go to the bass here for a second. You'll see the articulation set here is set to Logic, the bass, and it was set to the bass pick. Let me go and look at that one more time here. That's this one right here. So we can actually change those depending on which instrument we're using. Now, we'll look at that a little bit further in a minute because there are some things we can do that are really cool in terms of customizing other instruments that aren't these studio instruments. And I think that makes it even more powerful. So what exactly do these do and how can we use them? Let's look at, I just have this basic chord progression with our instruments loaded, the three of them. And we're going to play the beginning of it. And you'll hear the bass every once in a while do like a slide. And it's like, well, how do we accomplish that slide exactly? I've taken the bass and I just right-clicked on it and I said, convert to MIDI region. And that's what this is down here. And so with this MIDI region, let's expand this out a little bit. This is what the MIDI that's controlling that instrument. Now, the session instrument actually creates this MIDI, or it references it. It's a bunch of different MIDI regions that the tool has access to, and every time you change a parameter, it changes what comes out. And so it's not exactly freshly created. It's not like generated every time fresh. It's referencing like a data stack of all those things. That's the instrument. If I click on each of these, you'll look over here to the articulation, and it says down, up, auto. So that's like a up and down pick. And then you'll see on that one, it switches to slide by velocity. And then a down, up, slide by velocity, down, up, slide by velocity, etc. So it's referencing different samples and different instrument parts for each MIDI note. So if I wanted to, I could click on the first one and say, you know what, there's not too many that I'm going to change really for that, but we could make them all down or all up. We could do harmonics, and we could actually, if we wanted to, let's change this one to be like a harmonic. And now the two of them will play together. And so you can actually have different samples playing simultaneously by choosing the note to be on a different articulation. Okay, and by having both of those together, it will trigger them. You can hear the first note, and then it goes to the second one. So it's a monophonic instrument in this case. If you're doing this with other instruments, you can make it so that there's polyphony that they can play simultaneously. But in this case, the way it's set up, it's not. Let's go into the actual bass instrument for a moment. And then we can actually change that right here to polyphonic. And now they'll play simultaneously. However, that bottom note is going to kind of hog all the sound because it's louder and fuller. But if I were to actually turn it down, then you'd have a chance of hearing both of those. Does that sound good? Not really. Let's move this up maybe just an octave above. And then it sounds more like an overtone or something. That's not really the best use of that. Let's delete that and raise the velocity back up on here. But we could change any of these notes to be things that we want to with the articulation. But we have all of these different things. Portamento, we could add grace notes, slide-ins. We have different harmonics, dead note harmonics up and down, pick, hit, pick up, hit single, pick up, hit all. All of these things together allow us to create an exact bass part that we want to. It's a little different than having a bass player play it, because a bass player is going to do all these things naturally because of their skill and their performance ability. Well, I can't play a bass like that, and so I can go through there, get the notes how I want them, or use the session instrument first, convert it to MIDI, and then continue to manipulate it this way, and we can get so many different things with this. These do change as well, depending on the bass player we're using. So let's actually go back to here, and let's open up the session instrument. And then we have the retro rock, but we could change this to pop rock, pop songwriter, roots upright, indie disco, disco slap, modern R&B, modern Motown. Let's do the roots upright for a moment. We're going to change it all. And now, let's open up the bass, and you'll see, without actually comparing every single thing, because I don't have them side by side, these are different. Some of them are exactly the same, but look, we have a body tap, left hand pat, and then so we don't have all of the other ones either. Some of them are missing that we had on the other ones. But here's the hammer on, pull off. I don't know if we might have had that one, but here's standard. We don't have the up, down, auto. So each of these instruments are different. Now here's the key to all of this. These articulations are part of the articulation set over here. If I just change the instrument on this, it's going to leave the articulations the same. And so it makes more sense to change it down here. If we did want to change it in the actual instrument itself, then we would want to also change the actual instrument articulation set that we have over here instead, or along with, I should say. And so there are some parts of that make a lot of sense to do. Over on the left side, inside the library, for instance, let's do club ambience upright. And let's do crunchy pop. You'll see that these are changing when I change them from the library. And so that is something that if you change them from there for the instrument, it doesn't change the programming and the actual session player, but it does change the bass and all of the articulation patterns as well. So just keep that in mind. It's nice to have the library here. It's nice to realize that the two are connected, but we can also change them separately from the actual session instrument itself. Okay, so what happens if you want to create something new? Let's go here to the string sound for a second, but I'm going to switch this over to like a synthesizer, Alchemy, right? You can do a lot with Alchemy control-wise, but articulation set there's not one for that. Let's make a new one. And inside here, now we can actually program these. So articulation 1, we could give it a name, double click on it. The ID is selectable here. We can say what channel to do, what symbol we want it to have happen, etc. However, a lot of times what we're really looking at would be what we want to do with our switches. We could add a switch. Here's a note on, note off, poly aftertouch, controller, program aftertouch, pitch bend, velocity. Great. And so you say, what does this note on do? We can set the value start, value end, the mode, what happens if you hold it down or let it go, and then we can set it to an articulation set. Now the output of that, then, we tell it what we want to happen with the output once the articulation one is selected. And so there's so many different little things we can change here. Essentially, you say, when this happens, when a note gets pushed or a mod wheel gets touched, what happens when that happens? What MIDI channel is it on? What type of MIDI message is it on? And what value does it have? We assign it to an articulation number, and then we can actually then do that thing and change it for the notes. And then it would show up in this articulation list, and it would do whatever we tell it to do per note. Now, if none of that made sense to you, go back and watch it slower, or go mess around with that menu and figure it out. But it's a way to create your own articulations. If you have, for instance, an orchestral library that has key switching, so you push a key on the lower part of the keyboard and it switches the articulation you're using, you can turn that into an articulation option, so you can actually assign it by note on each of the actual MIDI notes instead of always having to do the key switching. That's one example. And so it's really powerful. It's actually a little time consuming. It's the kind of thing that I wish AI was actually able to help us with. If I said, make some articulations, some articulation IDs for all of these different sample packs, and then tell me when you're done and we'll use them. That would be cool. Okay, I hope this all was somewhat helpful, albeit perhaps a little confusing because the feature itself is intense and deep. But simply put, if you're going to use the bass instrument, make sure you are using the articulation options to make a really hyper-realistic sound. In the same way, and I'll say this again for the strings, if you are ever using the studio strings, make sure you're using these as well. You'll see I just loaded up the strings, and it only has the one articulation. Well, the best way to load up strings in Logic is to do it through the library. Here's the section instruments. Let's do Abbey Wood. And then once that is loaded, Let's open that up and go to the first one. Here's the strings. Then we have all of these attached, and we can actually use staccato, spiccato, long, fall short, scoop fast, scoop slow. All of these are super useful. And then you can come up with strings that actually sound good. I mean, that's where the power of this whole studio system is. What we need now are for the strings and the brass and the guitar to be able to have the full session instrument treatment that we have with the other instruments. So next update, maybe some of those, but hopefully some of the chord track functionality will be added. That's what we're hoping for, because we're getting better and better with each update, and I think that we're on the precipice of some really cool things.